Hello, everyone. In the eye of a dying star, we shall find a very transparent truth that beauty holds all secrets. And what that really means is that the reason this episode is titled Beauty Holds All Secrets is because the concept of beauty is a very important state of being. In other words, in regards to when you see something beautiful, what is happening to your consciousness, it's very important to study that because you must see that secrets are aspects of reality that it's as if you're not allowed in there, but you know there is a place. It's as if that party you're not allowed to. And so it's very important to realize that the answer beyond the question is actually a knowing that dissolves the illusion. Think of the knowing you have when you've seen, for example, a very exotic nature scene, you know. Think of that moment where you just saw the magnitude of a waterfall. Think of that moment when a bird flew perhaps inches from your face and you simply saw the design of the wing being. Beauty holds all secrets because in our sense of movement in reality, that movement gives us different views. So you have a certain association of who you are in the sense that if I ask you, you have a name for me ready, your name, right? If I ask you who are you, you will have your name, but you will realize beyond this name, what is part of your presence that is beyond acknowledgement of language. So in other words, what I'm saying is that what are human beings more than just the idea of a human being? And so you simply see that it's something that is beyond a human. And so because human is an image in a certain sense of space and time, it's as if the awareness to the transcendence of where the human being is heading is actually to a remembrance of its being, which is a different consciousness. So it's as if we're going through a fluctuation similar to the movements of the golden ratio, where there was a peak of awareness, and so now we have simply, jumped off that peak. But now coming back to an understanding that, oh, wow, again, there's emptiness in consciousness. You see, it's very crazy. People do not realize that nature will always be the last screen. So regardless of whatever suffering or fluctuation you go, in this existence, what you consider to be your last breaths will be amazing movement of life. And so clarity is important here because clarity means that you have a responsibility of finding the beauty that is your inspiration to live. And what that means is it's not there. Because sometimes you're associating with unnecessary labels and you don't need to be caught in such a web. For me, it's very interesting because when I thought about how I can communicate some of my internal experiences, or what I am saying now as internal for this conversation, is that I saw I cannot, because it is something that is beyond time and space. So how do you communicate a notion beyond time and space? Well, you actually really try to pinpoint what time and space is. And so then when you try to see where the question is coming from, you simply see that the question, its answer was actually the fact that the question never needed to be constructed so quickly with limited information. You are an able being before any face of humanity becomes your reflection in the mirror. And what that means is that we must recognize that each moment of life is valuable to not just external reality, but to internal reality as well. So it's as if that moment where you realize there's no point of judging anyone because your vision is your vision and theirs is theirs. So it's that moment where you realize you never could have hurt anybody other than the fact that your awareness has kept imagery that is suggesting a movement of what you consider to be your normal day. The pilot of consciousness must see that chaos is a great teacher, but at the same time, a teacher that is your greatest challenge until you recognize that you're on the same, let's say, level. So, for example, have you seen that moment in movies where the coach is telling the person, do you know what you're doing? Or the coach is trying to say something and the guy's not listening. Then the coach says it louder and the guy's like not still, hearing what the coach is saying. And then the guy says it so loud that, the guy really hears what he's saying, So in that moment, it's as if your interpretation of what reality is constant waves of meaning which you are choosing to receive in a certain way. So it's like it's like that argument where if for example for those people who believe in the Christ, if Christ came back, if Jesus came back, would you recognize him? And so you will see the reason we can't, perhaps, is because we have forgotten humanity. We have been a bit distracted by moving imagery, moving color in front of our eyes, and we've forgotten what we are an emanation of. The beauty I speak of is a beauty beyond conception. Do you know what that means? That means that moment where everything in your life is about to collapse, every meaning, every name, shape. And so you are, in a sense, running into the embrace of an unknown love. A love that is not formed, but is you. It's as if you're remembering yourself and then being an aspect of experience that is much more capable in being its manifestation. So it's like suddenly realizing you have the certainty of your legs when you get off your chair. And you will see that a wise being will cultivate an understanding of beauty as soon as possible. So beauty is not some fluffy thing which you must avoid because you are, a warrior with a heavy sword, You need to see that reality will flow as it will. And so you may put your finger in the river, but its vastness is of a greater direction. So do not think that your illusion or your lack of attention to your life, or you perhaps thinking, oh gosh, I made bad decisions or something, is something you need to receive as a burden. Don't make things a burden. Why do you have the concept of a burden? Why do you think things that are being given to you, things that randomly flow towards you, are all bad things, Guys, it's very crazy. There was a moment where in my life, I didn't accept things that were given to me, So like suddenly if I went somewhere, the way I was raised early on is as if someone, for example, just came and gave me, for example, a gift or something, like a free pen or a free, I don't know, like some free item that, you can just give to another person and it's still like a good item. Like, it's like a good pen when you don't have a pen, and you're late for class. Anyways, regardless of the intensity of your experience of life, your relationships with your sense of awareness to them are keeping a projection, and your sincerity is what will give you your the space you seek to be able to move. Think of it this way. You exist. You are a body. You can hear laughter. You can hear reality. And so as you're simply here, for a second, stop trying to be this form that is moving other forms and be aware of the movement of all form as one moment of presence. So it's as if that moment where you were, you were walking the park and you're looking at all the different trees, and you suddenly look at what the trees are looking at, and they're looking at the sky. And so when you look at the sky, you're like, there's no difference. There's no separation. It's as if man needs to look at the sky more often. Because if we do, we will expand in the sense that we're realizing, all right, there's no need for Bob's opinions to, lead to unnecessary conflict for both self and other. It's very important we have an ability any moment as beings to put our names aside and confront life through our directest experience. It's that moment where perhaps in Crouching Tiger and Hidden Dragon, the master, at the end was just, fighting the poison by moving the flow of his blood or something, some very intense martial arts ability. And so that moment, it's as if that moment before your transition, you do it with an honor and with an awareness to life. And so, guys, I want to share a very ancient story, a story where I believe the setting is in, I think it's in ancient Persia. It's a story of this poet, this mystic poet, I think Sufi poet. And before he's a Sufi poet, the story goes as if he's a man who, he's like a young guy. And so he's talking to this guy on the street, this very wise guy, this sage. And so the story goes, it's as if, like, visualize yourself for a second as if you're back in the day, like, let's say 1,000 years ago in some ancient culture, ancient Persian culture, for example, where you can visualize that. And you're just there. And so you're there, and there's another human being in front of you. And this is like a very wise human being. He's a human being who spent his whole life, for example, doing virtuous action. So this human being is telling you that he can consciously leave his body. And so you, as this, for example, let's say 30-year-old guy compared to this, let's say 7-year-old guy, are saying, no, you can't. Death is something that it's destiny and whatnot. And so how the story goes is that this wise old man, they had interesting hats back then, and it's as if like the hat was their hats were kind of cylindrical, so it's as if like while they're in the village, and the person's talking, you suddenly see this old man be as if, yes, you can, son. It's as if that old man, in communicating to that skeptic person, that skeptic poet, who when was inspired, like as if in a sense of a catalyst, to give the great speech, you suddenly see that this man tells you he has a conscious ability to leave his body, and he puts his hat beside on the wall. It's as if he goes beside the wall and puts the hat on the side of his head, as if like if he's leaning against the wall, he's balanced on the hat. So the hat is as if like is on the side of his ear, and he's leaning against the wall, and he's kind of balanced himself like how perhaps a rake would be balanced against the wall. And so the guy is there, and he closes his eyes, and it's as if as a being he's doing his last act. He knows as if he will be inspiring eons with this simple movement, And so he leaves his body, and so he dies. And so the 7-year-old man leans against the wall and dies like a rake, and in such a peaceful manner that this young guy, who was so convinced that there's destiny, forgets about the stories of destiny that he believes, forgets about his stories, and sees, wow, it's another dimension of experience of life. It's beyond what space and time is immediately telling you, or what you're considering is space and time. the value of direct experience is that it is of unknown potential. It's that moment where you see that you have not just been looking outwards. That from the beginning of your reality, it has been an internal experience that never needed an outside, because it was a vast acknowledgement of all of existence, of all that is. You find the fact that the forest is not ending where you thought it's ending, and so there's a much more greater sense of unknown in how we dissolve into our own mystery to then be found by the greatest eyes of our awareness. You must be very careful that right now, as a being, as a human being, your awareness to your being is your ability to move through symbology. Human communication is simply symbols being relevant to other symbols, and if consciously you decide, you can make all symbology irrelevant. So what that means is that me as a conscious being, if I'm in a room where there's a lot of noises, let's say a bunch of people are talking, I can choose to consciously tune and adjust my experience so that those words don't mean anything, and it's as if I'm just hearing sound. So it's as if when someone's speaking, I just turn off the meaning of the words and I just listen to them, and it's as if I'm just hearing sound. And it's as if that sound is a composition on its own. Therefore, your intensity of focus into your reality will make it beautiful, because it's navigating you from a very chronological sense of time, like from as if like we it's as if going from no longer needing a watch, because you are that watcher that is observing all conception. It's like you no longer need a watch, because you no longer need the illusion of movement to really give you your certainty for your movement. It's like if I came here and asked you, are you sitting, for example, on that chair, and you are, you don't need to think about it. You're sitting on that chair. You know. Do you see? So the knowing is much more instantaneous than, for example, you thinking about it. So what I mean by that is that your sense of beauty is how much you're confronting now beyond the need of wanting to do anything. It's like that moment where your fingers are covered in ink because your pen has broke as a writer, and so you don't, any white paper you touch, there's a smudge. Anytime you try to interpret something, you see you can't. So you need to be still and wash your hands and then come and write more comfortably. You need to adjust your reality by being aware of your dimension and realizing that your dimension is not relevant to what you need to read in a textbook or in a very ancient textbook. You need to see that it's very important for you to acknowledge your knowing in silence, in stillness. So that moment that let's, for example, if I get all of humanity, and we all come to you and we ask you, what is life? Imagine that audience. You would not say anything, and you would be like, I don't know. And you would enjoy that silence, that freedom of not having to be an idea and having to always be a certain shape to satisfy your condition. You are beyond your condition, and that's why the minute you become still, the minute you become silent, you become the ears of eternity. You become the observer of all movement. You become the experience of the Creator as all creation. And it's simply an awareness to existence in which the self projected an other to look at itself in new ways, but it never needed to. It's as if there is, of course, 360 degrees, but, some beings are satisfied with just the dot. As if all degrees are going to the same center. And so, regardless whether we saw circles on our crops, on our very sacred view of geometry, in our normal view of geometry, or whether we allowed shapes to teach us by taking form and allowing it to move in abstract ways, as if our color, our paintbrushes, were no longer just, colors that we went and bought in the store, but experience. We played with our memory. We took the image of now and we allowed it to manifest in a simultaneous knowing where you're not just experiencing here, you're experiencing an ability that is able into being an expression of here in a sense of multitude. So it's not that it's completely empty, it's just that when you realize that the Zen master's cup doesn't need to be full, you can also be aware of the intelligence of the hands that are pouring in a fresh tea. So it's not that you just suddenly think, oh gosh, I have to be a certain shape to satisfy a certain condition so that I can then be comfortable with where I'm heading in regards to what I feel about my truth. It's all about turning off all noise, turning off all meaning in regards to language, in regards to sentences, and in the silence of your being silent, to then become your reality. It is that moment where the pilot of consciousness was never here. It's that moment where you're realizing your work was so simply done, because in some manner it was never done. It was never your work. It's as if you were playful in your plane of dimension because you knew it. You knew it as the dimension. You knew it as the experience of your reality. The formless is always embracing the form. It's living through it. It's living through it. That moment where you thought you were committing a crime and no one was watching, actually all of existence was watching you. So it's not that you need to think that there's an image of a God to then judge you. It's just that you need to see you are connected to everything. So your act is simply that. It's as if in some form of profound manner you were sparked into this existence to then see that your creation was as hollow as the creation you thought you were. So when a self-aware being begins realizing the intensity of how he has been creating his holographic projection, he realizes the intelligence is beyond the intelligence where the limitation was created. So you're seeing, oh my God, if you were to visualize an onion, it's as if you thought your limitation was the first layer. Then you broke it and you're like, all right, it's not, okay, so wait a minute, my limitation is less, but there's still some aspects of me. And so you're constantly going through these layers where at the end of it, you're getting to the center of the onion and you've, in a sense, gotten rid of the last layer and you realize there's nothing there. So you realize that the ability of an advanced communicator is to communicate what is there without being there. And those beings they've, in a sense, taken the masks of calling themselves as channelers, as those people talking to other beings or psychics, are in essence moments of existence that in their self-communication have developed a certainty to then be a mirror for you. There is no psychic because there's no you. There's no you to go to a psychic. If you look at the nature of your reality, body dissolves into mind, mind dissolves in what is direct, in a very direct and experiential way, consciousness, and as you become aware of this, you see that there's nothing there. It's as if you have reached the edge of your mind, and so as you step beyond this sense of association, your feet are on new pastures. And you will look upon a new horizon in the sense that you are now a creator. It's as if from creation you have through your a confrontation and direct experience of life and awareness to all that you know, you have suddenly become the responsibility of creator. You have become, so let me frame it like this. You are a creation. your whole life the Creator has been unknown to you, in your direct experience and acceptance of all that you are, you will see that the qualities you thought, which were your ability to see a Creator or think of a Creator, are actually your gaze. So your confusion is your clarity, actually. But it's just that your confusion, if you're desperate for your confusion to satisfy a certain external rationality, it never will. Sometimes your confusions are points of dissolution where you're like, wait a minute, I'm not this actor. And so in ancient traditions, and especially in how playfully, for example, Indian culture, and yogis have how they used to acknowledge it. It's very fascinating. It's as if they called it the divine play. It's as if the human being who was named and given a shape and always saw his reflection to just be the truth, realized that no, that this whole life I've been acting, this whole life that I've been walking, this whole life which I've been seeing the fluctuation of shape and form, there has been something there that was observing it as a whole, as a collective, and as a knowing. It's as if you feel confused, but once you look at what you are all knowing. So it's your relationship of how you're working with your reality. It's that moment where you realize that, oh my God, the reason my life is the way it is because that is how I'm actually looking at it. And so the clarity must come from a moment where you're existentially allowing yourself. It's like if you've been thinking that you're a loser your whole life, suddenly you're realizing internally that that definition is as empty as any definition. It's that moment where it's like that feeling where your whole life you've had a mask on and you suddenly take off the mask and there's nothing there. And when I say there's nothing there, it's that moment where you're comfortably realizing that that sunset, which was very beautiful, and you were comfortably on a very beautiful nature trail seeing, had a meaning that was as equivalent as the greatest meaning suggested in poetry. So you realize you don't have to segment or measure human experience because you can't, and it's not even measurable in the sense that we call it human experience. You are a moment of experience in which a human is in your immediate focus. But when you look at the actuality, when there's self-awareness, it ceases to exist. It's as if your hand has come out of, let's say, the water. So it's as if like it was never there in the water, because you always had an ability to take it out of the water. But in that moment it was. So you will see that your experience of that sense of multidimensionality and how the pilot of consciousness navigates through the planes of existence is by seeing that it exists. And so it's in his ability to let go and to not touch anything that his untouched sense of existential directive will guide him. It's as if that moment where when I looked at other human beings for answers, I couldn't find it. When I looked at the planet, I couldn't find the answer. When I looked at our solar system, I couldn't find it. But only in perhaps what for me came playfully as another galaxy did I see the answer was there. That we are right now just playing with color. Those stars we think that are there are perhaps not there. And so man is playing with nothing. All these values, all this piece of paper that we call money is hollow. But we see that we are entering a system that decisions have been made, and those decisions are still being decided to be kept because people are still living the way you are. But you are not chained by the decision. You are a moment of experience, and your moment of experience is always free. You are always free. But if this freedom wants to be a certain shape that you need to have, then you must realize that that sense of self asking that question can never be free because it's defined by its limitation. So what that means is that if I ask you who you are and I suddenly hear that you're saying, well, I'm this guy who can't do things, I'm incapable, I'm got bad timing, and I just hear this communication, what I will notice is that you are associating with aspects regardless. It's as if like you as a human being, you've gone through an experience and you are associating with just the most intense ones and the ones where you actually did not confront. So that moment when I see a human being tell me something, I will immediately tell them that's what you need to confront. So for example, when that moment where that person, for example, was telling you, oh, yo, buddy, I'm rich, you know, or yo, buddy, I'm this guy, I'm that guy, yo, buddy, I'm a CEO, yo, buddy, I'm the president of the world, you know, you see that after he said that, he suddenly looked at the world and realized, no, regardless of how much we cover it in words, we are always dancing with the unknown. And so we are lovers of the unknown in the sense that we're always moving beyond our ideology. There's always that other talk. There's always that next step. It's as if that human being, that moment of experience, was experiencing life in human form, and then at some point it realized, all right, I have reached the peak of this cliff. It's as if I have walked this mountain, and so now I need to walk down this mountain and go through another mountain. And so it's very important to see that where the peak of the mountain leads is through a transparency that becomes the voice of a galaxy through a man who saw what was within could never be named. And so the nameless is simply that moment in life where you're accepting all reality. And then you will see a sense of sincerity and clarity come. Then you will find the halls of compassion. And as you enter those halls, you will begin seeing that compassion and the allowance for you to exist in better ways will lead you to experiences that you cultivate. So it's like if you've been someone who's gone through very terrible experiences and you're like, gosh, how can I? It's as if like I should have gone a floor up, I've come a floor down. How you elevate yourself is by making a request. It's as if for a second being like, all right, forget my story, forget who I am, and you just look at life, and with the longing of everything, your totality, you just look at reality and you just ask and say, reveal yourself to me. And so some prophets might be ones who the collective chooses to find. But other prophets are individually found in the sense that they're simply people who are just walking well and suddenly are given tasks simply because they're walking. Elevate yourself through a confrontation of all that you know. Do not say you're a good guy. Do not say you're a bad guy. Acknowledge the whole spectrum. Realize that clarity is beauty. And so a beautiful moment is empty. Because if it was not, it would be incomplete. It's as if I, regardless of how many words I could find to explain to you that sunset, you were dissolved in that vision of light. And it's very important because when it dawns on you that you share the same you that is in universe, you will see that beauty enters your life when you live in a way where you're giving everything. I would like to share a quote with you by a very realized poet named Rumi. And his quote says, "Before death takes away what you are given, give away what there is to give." And what that really means is that you will see, because you're temporal, because we all are going through a process of life and then death, and as we are, we recognize that we're as comfortable in looking at death as we are at life, we then give ourselves a moment of revelation that it is not trusted by your individuality, but only found when your individuality trusts the collective, that it dissolves into that knowing. So what that really means is that when you look at your conception, you will fall into natural pathways of how your vision came into being. And so it's as if, like, the way you played out this movie, in its rewinding, you are feeling the winds of time and space change to come to a point where all lines are going through, and there are so many lines going through this point that all these lines are an infinity of planes that are navigated in an instant. Secrets are moments where your awareness becomes your allowance. And then you see yourself, and it's empty. It's that beautiful freedom where you thought you were someone who was going to die. No. Consciousness is all that is. And you can't speak it. You can't speak about it. It's unspeakable, but it is very bright. Learn to love yourself, and you will then reveal your greatest treasures. Learn to become passionate. Become the Dalai Lama immediately to yourself, and then immediately become, the Dalai Lama to others. And when I say become the Dalai Lama, envision him walking beside you and what he would say. Envision graceful forms in your agitation. And there is no agitation, because those forms are a reminder of your harmony. And allow yourself to play, because that's how the greatest treasures are revealed. Playfulness. Oh, that's the only way. Because playfulness is when you are giving all there is to then receive all that can be. Much blessings and namaste.